Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
It's a beautiful Friday morning. Well, it's supposed to be. I hope it's a beautiful one. You can only hope, when you start the day. Good morning and welcome. I'm Maupe Yusuf.
Of course, we're glad to be with you once again. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Hey, hope is a strategy sometimes, and you can only actually just speak those things into reality. Welcome to Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
Well, I had a problem starting with that, question of whether it's a beautiful Friday morning or not. I mean, every day is a gift, and we have to take each day as it comes, giving thanks to the one who has given us the day. But when you think about what happened yesterday in Lagos, the disastrous accident that happened, a train colliding with a bus which had just taken people on their way to work, and the fact that 6 people lost their lives in that accident, many more grievously injured. Some others were able to escape with, light injuries. There are big questions to ask as to how it is that we handle each day that is given to us, whether we really appreciate that life itself is a gift and that we take every precaution that we can to preserve the lives that have been put in our custody, in our care. Be it our own personal lives, be it the lives of other people around us. And it would seem that safety is now one of the things that we need to pay even more serious attention to. Because, I mean, how do you explain the visuals on your screen that a train was, on its way, on its own track? People could hear it coming. We understand that other cars had stopped, but that the bus driver just felt that somehow he could scale through. And even people in the bus were calling his attention. I mean, these are the reports that we've heard so far, to the fact that a train is coming, but somehow he insisted he could make it, and this was the result of it. And this is not the only thing we've seen in recent times that continues to draw attention to the fact that we need to pay more attention to safety in our country. We need to pay more attention. Only recently, the Lagos state government had cause to shut a school, Christian schools on Okpebi Road, while it investigated the death of a student in that school. We understood later, I think the student's name is Whitney, that the girl had been electrocuted to death. They had gone for inter-house sports at a place, and perhaps a naked cable was somewhere lying naked, lying fallow, and perhaps she stepped on it. I mean, these are the stories that we've heard. They're still conducting an investigation into it. But the coroner's inquest has revealed that she died of electrocution. So if that is the case, it does raise big questions as to what attention we pay to safety. Must something happen first before we now begin to look at how we can, prevent it from happening again? Or are we proactive about saying that something can happen at first before we take preventive measures? Don't forget that only recently the Lagos state government was thinking of launching a blue line. The blue line was launched, and they're thinking of launching a red one in very due course. And they had to fence off those rails. They had to fence off those rails, so that people are not electrocuted, when they try to cross the rail, because we understand that the line was going to be running on electricity. So there are big questions as to how much attention we pay to safety as a people. I think that that's something I'd like to, and well, not just me, of course my colleagues as well would like to highlight, because yesterday was really, really very tragic to see, and we hope that when it has happened once, perhaps it'll be the last time that it will happen. We understand Lagos has the Lagos state government has declared 3 days of mourning. How is that coming along in Lagos, Bukola and Kayode?
Well, Maupe, I'm on all fours with you on your commentary on, that unfortunate accident of monumental proportions from yesterday. And it raises a lot of questions as to how we manage, our highway rail grade crossings in, Lagos and in Nigeria. I recall in Abuja, just a few months back from last year, we had a derailment as well, in which a passenger, a driver, a female driver, was unfortunately killed. So how do we manage these types of crossings? And there are quite a number of conflict points, apart from that one at PWD in Ikeja in Lagos. There's supposed to be traffic signs, because we have them also in other parts of the world. There's supposed to be traffic control signs, to help passengers as well as drivers to help them cross whenever there's that conflict point, when a trail is oncoming and a driver is also about to cross. I've had cause to travel across that PWD a number of times in recent times, and I've observed, it's a beehive, a lot of activity in that area. There are police operatives as well. But how often are there police operatives? How often does a train travel on that road? Because vehicles are always traveling 24 hours of the day. So in the absence of traffic signs and traffic controls and traffic officers, what happens? Lives are left, at the mercy of chance, and this is really unfortunate. So if we don't have the town planning expertise to help us manage such, should we close our highway rail grade crossings? Those are the options that I believe we must begin to explore. If every day must be a gift, and we do not necessarily have to leave lives at the mercy of chance and our inability to manage such situations, I think we should rather be a proactive country rather than a reactive one. Coyote.
Honestly, yesterday was a difficult one for me, especially we were on the show when this actually happened. And
yeah.
I know a lot of people have talked about what should be done, barricades around that area, barricades that actually work and all of that. But I'd just like to first commiserate with the families who have lost loved ones. 6 people died in that incident. 2 were taken to the hospital dead, and the remaining 4 died in the process because the injuries were just too much. So our deepest commiserations with them. It's a very difficult thing to actually lose someone. And it's been a difficult period for us nationally. So adding this to it, really, I really commiserate, in fact, we commiserate with those families. And I'd like to also appreciate the first responders. Now, when I say first responders, I mean people who were even around that place and responded first. They were not health workers, they were not skilled in that, but they actually put themselves in the line and try to rescue those people in the bus. So thank you. And I think it speaks to, that hope in humanity in Nigerians. Nobody asked, where are you from? Are you my person? No, everybody just went all out to try to, rescue those people and the health workers as well. Now, there's a lot of debate around that, but you have to give it to Lassoth. I've had to take an emergency to Lassoth, and I know people have different experiences, and that's the point I would just want to make. Yes, we need to expand our capacity, but in the light of the brain drain and all of that, the health system in Nigeria, particularly in Lagos, is challenged. So, yes, while we commend them, I know there were questions as to how the triage went. They had to use the helipad to cater to people. And, I mean, personally, I believe that maybe the helipad should be converted into another maybe emergency ward where you can have more capacity to deal with emergencies. Because, lots of people who've been turned back because there's no bed space and all of that. I mean, you can have the helipad on top of a building and all of that. And this is just a suggestion to the Lagos State government. But in terms of our safety and emergency management, I think every Nigerian should try as much as possible to be conversant with, safety. I know offices, there's OHSE, Occupational Health and Safety Environment and all of that, but everybody should actually be aware of safety first, okay? All the rush to try to beat traffic, to try to beat the queues, I think it should actually end. We should taper down on that, because your action or inaction, as the case may be, might cost a lot of people their lives. And look at what happened. So it's mixed feeling for me. I just hope we learn from this. Back to you, Abuja.
That it's really a huge one, and the challenge about all of this is that, from the way things stand, it does appear as though we may not have seen the end of these sort of accidents. It's hydro-headed, really. It's hydro-headed. The big question about safety and how we handle all of this across board, it is huge. And yeah, much as you guys have highlighted, a lot of what needs to be done, what is being done. But look, there's just so many perspectives to all of this, from the drivers, how we use the road, how we are certified to use the road, what kind of punitive measures accrue to or apply or to those who use the roads or those who default, from the authorities ensuring that the proper things are done, which raises more concern now, even though, yes, we're all happy about development, infrastructural development, but in Lagos, the high-speed rail that's about to come to stream, the electrified ones, the road tracks electrified, we just have more work to do to ensure that the kind of thing that we see going on, even with the ones that we expect that people should put in place, regular, I mean, basic. It sounds basic now, but look at where we are. Look at what we're grappling with. It may sound basic. It's supposed to be basic. It is basic by global standards, but we're grappling our straws to ensure that the basic things are done. That's our reality in this part of the world. And so if you look at rail infrastructure in every part of this country, you will have a lot of questions. Guys, it was on this same program that we spoke about. Remember the family that was caught up in the rail track in Abuja here?
Yeah.
A similar narrative.
Okala highlighted
Very similar narrative.
Perhaps one place we could start with the schools. You know, how much safety education do we incorporate in our curriculum from as basic as even nursery school to primary school to secondary school? Because it also has to do with the mentality, the fact that people are willing to take risks. For instance, why did that driver think that it was okay for him to cross when other cars were waiting?
Part of the reason is that when you drive in Lagos, those yellow buses, you need to find out, just simple inquiry about who owns them. That may give you an inkling into why some of these things happen, because they feel they're working for owners who are, quote unquote, big shots, untouchables. And so they can do anything. That's why they behave the way they do. They do anything and get away with it. And in some cases, politicians actually use some of those chaps. Those are people who do the dirty work for them. So when police say they arrest some of them, the next day they're back on the street. Or when the road traffic officials are trying to enforce the law with these chaps, they tell them, no, you can't do certain things. And they feel untouchable.
I even understand that some of the downfall buses are owned by policemen.
So there you go.
But that's not the issue here, because this was not a downfall bus. This was a staff bus.
Those drivers that they get to do BRT, where did they come from? That's the mindset. So these things are, that's why we say it's hydro-headed.
A lot of work.
It is hydro-headed.
And it's all our work, all our work.
We all have to do what we can, as we can, but unfortunately, this is the results. And that's why when we take certain actions, in whatever position we occupy, whether at the top, at the bottom, it has huge ripple effect. You just never know. You may think, oh, no, it's just within my own space. But it's never usually like that. It's never usually like that. But that's an unfortunate scenario we're grappling with now. So that said, we'll just have to take you right on to the dailies and take a look at, we'll start off with New Telegraph this morning. Guba States Assembly, that's elections that is going to come up, well, the scheduled elections now. Court orders INEC. Okay, no, pardon me, this is different. This is different. But yes, about elections. Guba State Assembly, court orders INEC to allow temporary voter card for March 18 polls. Oh, okay. It says March 18 polls, but when you read through, okay, don't worry, we'll go through that for you and put it in context in terms of what transpired and whether or not that can apply to March 18 polls. But the writer here says the law under Section 47 provides for voters' card, but no portion of 1999 Constitution Electoral Act states only PVC can be used. This is a judgment that was delivered, handed down yesterday, part of which we'll find out. We'll go through that and see how that will play out, or how that is expected to play out. And then there's some development associated with that story as well. And then just above this list story, Nigerian digital music media in race for 3.2 trillion naira investments. Oh yeah, the sector does need a lot of investments to thrive. I mean, in other climes, they have this massive investment structure, at least to ensure that they don't go under. Several of them have it. And then at the bottom strip, unless court rules otherwise, Tinubu's victory stands. Presidency replies, PDP, LP, others. Well, that's what they're in court, to see how the court can rule otherwise. And then the writers here, rules out repeat of June 12, 1993 poll annulment. Okay, you may need to know why they're making this. Coalition rejects poll results, calls on INEC chair to resign as 18 local observers give credence to poll. Don't disappoint Nigerians, Nido tells judiciary. So you also see that one right there. So there you go. That is it with New Telegraph this morning.
Daily Trust is the one I'm looking at this morning, and the story also on the front page, not a pretty one. Boko Haram kills 35 fishermen in Borno. So we thought Boko Haram was totally powerless, but look at this. 35 fishermen. That's a lot of people. Terrorists tie them in nets, spray them with bullets. That's according to locals who understand or who saw perhaps what happened. We're sad. That's according to the Emir of Dikwa. Government in talks with security operatives, attributed to the governor Zulum. You also see there are a number of other stories there, but there's a picture to show you a condolence visit there being paid to the family, or to the families of those who lost their lives, the fishermen who were killed by Boko Haram in Borno. Look at this. They also have the story, 6 killed, scores injured as train crushes BRT in Lagos. Buhari, Gbajabiamila, Sanwo-Olu mourn. Train passengers worried over rising accidents. Federal government begins probe. So that is also at the bottom there. INEC kicks as court okays 2 to use temporary voter card for voting. So that story is also there. We'll be digging in a bit on that for you in a moment. A number of stories just beneath the nameplate. Nigeria records 1.2 trillion naira surplus as foreign trade hits 52.38 trillion naira in 2022. Election postponement, voters, parties express mixed reactions. That's also there for you to look at. Shippers Council, FAN, others score low on ease of doing business compliance. Page 20 is where you find details. I imagine that in the coming days, we might get a response from the Shippers Council and perhaps FAN as well, because that certainly is not a flattering story on the state of shipping and aviation in Nigeria. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
And flip to This Nigeria. This Nigeria also focuses on, our first story that we commenced the program with today, and that's the train bus collision in Lagos yesterday. Look at the big story. 6 die, 79 injured in Ikeja train mishap. Lagos declares 3-day mourning, calls for blood donation to victims. Speaking of which, if you're around that area, but particularly the Lassuth area in Ikeja, you can just, make an effort to make life easier for those who have been injured by donating blood. It will be very welcome at this time. Sanwo-Olu, Jandor, Rhodes Viva visit scene. Buhari sympathizes with victims as Safety Bureau commences investigation. You'll find all those details inside page 4 of This Nigeria. And of course, you can see the aerial view of that very, very tragic derailment yesterday. This picture speaks volumes. Okay, away from that big story now, let's move to other stories. This one just underneath the big story. Troops recover over 10 million naira from bandits, collaborators, as 1,332 terrorists surrender. Find details on page 7. Nigeria's external reserves hit lowest level in 12 months. What's the figure now? Last time we checked was hovering somewhere around 36 billion, but you find details on page 17. And right at the bottom strip, look at this one. It's a caution to INEC: don't repeat February 25 episode in governorship assembly elections. APC urges INEC. We no longer have confidence in commission. That's ascribed to the Labour Party. That's on page 5. Let's leave it there now for This Nigeria.
Well, Vanguard leads with this shift in state and the State Assembly and Guber polls. APC, Labour Party, IPAC, others disagree. INEC has eroded our confidence. That's from Labour Party. It says this INEC can no longer be trusted. And you see, we respect INEC's decision. APC, excuses no longer acceptable. IPAC cautions INEC, postponement inevitable. So, I mean, it's expected really that parties will disagree, perhaps in the build-up to the elections. Anyway, they had disagreed on policies, candidacy or candidature of their flag bearers and all of that. So it's just a continuation. Page 5 has more details for you. And just to pay attention on some other issues that seem to be flying below the radar, but it's the elephant in the room. On top of the big Vanguard logo, you see old notes: cash crunch worsens as Nigerians wait on Buhari. For the record, it's exactly 7 days after that Supreme Court judgment. It was last week Friday, and the president or the CBN have not spoken to that. So is it taken that, well, this is how it would continue to be? Well, we find more details on the inside pages, but the case for Nigerians is still the same. Lots of people don't have access to cash. They have to walk distances. They will have actually taken public transport. And it goes on and on. There's Mr. and Mrs. for you, just something to light up your day on the front page as well. But I'll take this one on a final note. IREV glitches didn't deter beavers. INEC insists. So again, INEC is doubling down on that position. I'm not sure the IREV has been fully populated just yet. I'll check. But as at last time, it was just over 90%. I'll leave you there for Vanguard newspaper for you.
Well, take a look at the Guardian newspaper next. Poll shifts may cost Nigeria more than $2.23 billion suffered in 2019. Okay, trying to understand that. I know a lot of people may feel the same way. That's a lot of money. $2.23 billion suffered in 2019. Postponement compounds Naira fuel scarcity woes. SBM. So this is, well, unfortunately, the way things play out here. And then, why Buhari is quiet over allegations of irregularities against INEC. I think people would like to know that. They want to find out why. March 18 polls, excuses no longer acceptable. IPAC cautions INEC. Aburi, INEC has eroded our confidence. Protect integrity of data from beavers, APC tells INEC. INEC kicks as court orders commission to allow 2 Nigerians vote without PVCs. And lots of things going on, even in several other quarters about the Naira, the old Naira. Several people still coming up with the narrative that they're still being rejected in some quarters, and you still wonder, why should that even be the case after the court has ruled on that matter? One does never cease, isn't it? Despite reported positive trend, palm oil industry still struggling. So raises more questions now. And then several other pieces here. Oh, look at this. Who would have thought? 1 week after, that's 1 week after Supreme Court's ruling, CBN's silence stokes confusion. You see that at the bottom strip right there. So that's part of what I even highlighted about some quarters, where people say, look, they're not accepting the currency. Maybe we'll ask lawyers now what the implication of this is, and what can be done to ensure that the law is enforced. So it's a question of enforcement now, isn't it? So that is the Guardian this morning.
I'm looking at leadership newspapers for you this morning, and they have this latest Leadership Friday. For a moment now, I don't know, it just disappeared. Trying to see if I can quickly call it up again. Yes, I found it. It says post-postponement, governors re-strategize, woo voters with jobs, promotions. That's...
Oh dear.
I'm just...
Okay, bring it on.
Is this vote buying? Well, this counts as vote buying. I don't know how this works.
Oh, wow.
Governors re-strategize, woo voters with jobs, promotions. I don't know.
Are you giving them employment letters already?
If this works, I mean, assuming the people vote, I mean, if they go and vote because they got this, I don't know whether that will count as vote buying. If it doesn't, I mean, but there's no guarantee that it will work. Because if you had this job to give all along and you didn't give it, you withheld it, why should anybody reward you for giving them a job?
You're giving them this job under what?
Under duress.
Oh boy. Did they even go through due process? What kind of jobs are they even offering?
I don't know. You want to read the story on page 4 of the paper. But look at this. Tough race expected in Lagos, Delta, Kano, Kaduna, Gombe, Nasarawa, Katsina. Okay? Remarkable states there, and you'll know why, because those states, well, I don't know. Just take a look at page 4. You'll get the reason why from page 4. But I think most people who have been following the elections might be able to hazard a guess as to why these states have been listed as battleground states. We respect INEC's decision to postpone polls. We respect INEC's decision to postpone polls. That's attributed to the APC. Bajabia Miller tops list of contenders for Tinubu's chief of staff. So that is also right there. But he is a member of the House of Representatives. How's that going to work? Crisis in IPOP. In IPOP camp, Kanu seeks to replace senior lawyer. On page 9 of the paper. And they also have the story, 6 die in Lagos train accident. Sanwo-Olu declares 3 days of mourning. Woman jailed 24 years for $298,000, 48 million naira property fraud. So that story is also on the front page for you. We'll leave it there for Leadership Friday.
And turn our attention to News Direct. The Nigerian News Direct this morning, as always, has a potpourri of stories for you. Let's begin with the lead story. Alleged electoral fraud. Presidency breaks silence, justifies Tinubu's victory. Let's take a look at the riders. Says no going back on outcome. No case of annulment. June 12, 1993 won't repeat itself. Says allegations against INEC vile, unsubstantiated, as court orders commission to allow use of temporary voter cards for forthcoming election. Afenifere joins knocks on INEC, says Obi won election. Well, let's leave that for the courts to decide, and the court has begun the process for its decision already. Just a few more before we exit. NCC spotlights renewable energy on World Consumer Rights Day. And let's leave it there now for the Nigerian News Director. And I believe that ends our newspaper review segment for this morning. And there's so much more to unfold for you, but that will be after the break. Stay with us.
All right, well, yes, indeed, Buki. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Okay, welcome back. So now this matter which we spoke about in the opening, where some ladies already highlighted it, the matter came through yesterday. We'll have a lawyer to shed light on that matter and some other matters. Mr. Matthias Emeribe joins us now. He's a lawyer. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well,
good morning.
Yeah, I know. Apologies on the streets of Lagos. It's a very interesting day, I tell you, in Lagos with all that is going on. We hope everybody stays safe as much as they can. Now, about that decision of the court, which INEC, by the way, has said they're going to appeal that matter. Now, when you went through that, because this matter came up at different quarters, people talking about whether or not it was really important or necessary or what the law provided and what we should be doing much later about the permanent voter card, its function in context of the beavers, but particularly about that judgment. And when you read it, what were your impressions? Because those two gentlemen did go to court and they're happy that they got victory. They got judgment from the court.
Yes, after going through the judgment of the court, it was clear that what the court did was to restore the rights of Nigerians, provided you have attained the age of 18, to vote or be voted for. Because it will be absurd that after having gone through the rigors of registration, then the body in question that is vested with the power and the duties to get you registered and issued with the necessary PVC will come out subsequently, after all effort made at even getting even the PVC, and they are telling you that the temporary voter's card issued to you cannot suffice. Meanwhile, the practical effect of what we have seen on the field is that for you to vote, it is the beavers itself that will identify you as the authentic owner of that name and the person who actually was registered in that polling unit. So it is absurd that INEC will be insisting that if you don't have the permanent voter's card, you cannot vote. I mean, that is depriving you of your right, or depriving you having the what you may call the opportunity for you to be part of those who will decide the future of your country, Nigeria, and perhaps your state or whatever. So for me, that decision, for all intents and purposes, captured the legal framework of that provision. And the interpretation being ascribed to it by INEC, for me, for all intents and purposes, runs foul of what that provision intended. And that is what I feel that the Federal High Court correctly interpreted. And then, of course, gave, for me, what I feel to be the right judgment in that regard. However, I know that the Federal High Court refused one of the prayers, which is where the litigant equally asks that whatever judgment they are getting thereof should also be made to be nationwide, in particular as it concerns every other Nigerian that are suffering the same fate as them. But for all the court was simply saying they didn't come by way of representative, they didn't come in a representative capacity. But for me, whether representative or not, it is a judgment that every other Nigerian can lean on, because it is binding on INEC, binding on all parties, binding on all authorities as it stands.
But Mr. Merribe, how are other Nigerians, because that was an interesting part where lots of people immediately they saw the judgment, they thought, oh, okay, so it means this can apply to us. But when you look through, and the court was specific about their position on their third prayer, how then can you say that every Nigerian can latch onto? Because I thought it was expressly provided that it was just those two gentlemen who approached the court.
Yes, but notwithstanding, because what the court simply said, because I agree with the court, because it wasn't brought in a representative capacity. Because what you do is that what the court has done is to interpret the provisions under which INEC in question lean on to say that they are depriving individuals of voting because they don't have their PVC. So if that provision has been interpreted by a competent court of jurisdiction, the effect is that every other Nigerian can lean on that particular judgment as a basis of saying that this right endures in their favor.
So
you understand the point I'm making? Yeah.
So shed a little more light on that. How can they take advantage of that? Do they have to go to court to get?
No. They can arm themselves with that authority, even if they are going to the polling unit. Now, the danger there is that if they are deprived, it could form the basis of them suing for damages against INEC. Because that provision, that decision of the court, what it did was to interpret the various provisions of the Electoral Act, which by and large has therefore been given what you may call a clearer definition for all to understand. So the fact for me, I feel there is even a surplusage for the parties that went to court to request or perhaps to urge the court to also make such a pronouncement to be nationwide concerning all of those that are suffering similar fate. I feel it is a surplusage. It's enough that what the court has done is to give what is the rightful, what we may call a declaration and a rightful interpretation to the provisions of the Electoral Act, which INEC has misconstrued by saying that if you don't come with your PVC, permanent voter card, you cannot vote. No, what that judgment has said is that, look, if you have your temporary voter's card, because what they are simply saying is that the content of what you have in the PVC, so to say, is what matters, because those are where they have front load, or should I say, you have all information concerning you loaded. Okay. That is in the biomodel, the beavers. Not the temporary voter's card and the permanent voter's card, they're almost doing the same thing. It's just that, according to the court, you are looking at the form and content, or should I say the substance, so to say. So
when people now, because Section 47 of the Electoral Act, which was cited there, 47(1), which says, a person intending to vote in an election shall present himself with his voter's card to a presiding officer for accreditation at the polling unit in the constituency in which his name is registered. Now, if the person now goes to the polling unit and this provision is clearly there, and INEC says, look, once you have, because all of the other methods, they say, follows from this particular incident. When you present your card, then all the other processes can kick in. Now, they're saying, look, if you don't do this, the other processes cannot kick in. What if they get there and INEC says, well, look, we're in a bind here. We're not able to carry out these other functions because of this.
Sorry, let me tell you, by the interpretation of the court, that is why, if you read through that judgment, the court made emphasis in stating clearly that what that provision has is that bring your voter's card. It's not talking of bring your PVC, that is your permanent voter's card. So your voter's card could be your temporary voter's card or your permanent voter's card. So whichever one you come with, provided it can be used in identifying you with the beavers, because every information concerning whether it is the PVC or the temporary voter's card you are having is contained in the beavers. And that is why it is possible that some will vote, some will be rejected, some will pass the test. Some will be rejected and some will pass the test. So if that provision says voter's card, and the court was emphatic about it, it says that there's no way, even if it has said permanent voter's card in some other subsequent provision, as long as in interpreting, the court, what the court has tried to do is to give substance to the provisions. In other words, not to give justice to voters, because the truth in our law, the concept is ubi ius, ubi remedium. Where there is a wrong, there is always what? A right. Meaning that you cannot go to court and you come back worse than the way you went. And so what the court has done is to not invest in you, to let you understand your right as fully enshrined in our Constitution as well as the Electoral Act. So you cannot have your temporary voter's card, which by implication will mean that you have been captured in the national registration data of INEC. And so, meaning that every other problem, in other words, things that you needed to do, you have done everything possible for you to have the right to decide your future. So to not say that they are now leaning on just barely having the PVC, other than the temporary voter's card, the court saw that as an absurdity, and of course ruled as such.
It will be interesting to see how this is implemented, because we see that this has not gone down well with INEC. if the idea behind, because if you also look at 47.2, it talks about how the presiding officer shall use a smart card reader or any other technological device that may be prescribed by the commission for the accreditation of voters to verify, confirm, or authenticate the particulars of the intended voter in the manner prescribed by the commission. So there is also an emphasis on making sure that the voter who comes, who presents a card, is really the voter that is before the presiding officer. And that's why INEC continues to say that it only wants people to use their permanent voter card. So I don't know whether this was also taken into cognizance in reaching this judgment.
Yes, yes, the court took that into consideration because the emphasis is on identification to be sure that the person coming before you is the person that is registered in that polling unit and is the person that wants to vote. Because the whole essence is to make sure that we don't have people who are impersonating to come there to vote. And that is why for you to vote, there are two basic ways that can be used in identifying you. It's either your fingerprint or your facial look. If none of this, if you don't pass any of these tests, you'll be asked to leave, that you are not the person that is registered there. So every name on the register has the necessary features, which is the biometric. Either it is the fingerprint or the facial expression. And so to now insist on the card, because meaning that every other person card is just simply the what you may call the label that you use in coming to that place. Now, it is possible that if you don't have that label, does that not take away your personality, as it were? I don't think that should be the intention, and that is what the court tried to interpret there. So that provision of 47.2 is even giving credence, because you will discover that it is the biomodel, the BVAS itself, that has all information concerning that person. And that is why you cannot vote unless you carry out those two steps. Either your finger identification, or better still, your facial expression. If none of these things are captured, the implication is that you are not the person registered there to vote in that very polling unit.
How do you think that this can be stretched? Because really, there have been these arguments before now, but I think that perhaps to also maintain some control and maintain some sanity, perhaps that's the reason why INEC continued to insist that people had to get their permanent voters card. But looking at how this has been interpreted now, even though it's only two people that have, that the court says will enjoy this particular judgment because it's not representative, what much more do you think, will I say, in what further way can it be stretched? Because people are saying, as time goes on, we should be able to vote with our national identity number. We should be able to vote with our driver's license, because before you get a driver's license, you should be, you should have gotten a national identity number. So in future, I don't know whether INEC will appeal this, even though they say they're kicking. Do you think that as time goes on, many more Nigerians might say, look, I don't even need to get on the voter register. The fact that I have this what they call that, my driver's license, or I have a national identification number, should be enough for me to vote?
It's possible that in future that we would vote with our either national or whatever that we have. All that matters is the identification that you are the one that is coming before the commission to vote. That's on the election day. Because what INEC tried to do is to stop this issue of people who are not registered, particularly in the polling unit, to come there to vote, or those who would probably have taken somebody else's identity card or whatever to come and vote. Now, you will discover that by the BVAS, the BVAS machine, that appears to have taken off all of it, has dealt with that issue considerably. Now, what we need to do is that, for me, for all intents and purposes, I believe that what the court has done is to stretch, or better still, expand the horizon of identification, so that you don't just pigeonhole everybody to say that if you don't have your, the PVC. Like one of the findings that the court made in that judgment was that, look, you gave a time for registration, people registered. You gave time for collection of the PVC. People went there to collect their PVC, only for them to go on and on. They are telling them that the PVC is not there. Meanwhile, at the time of registration, you gave them a temporary voters register, a card, in order for them to get to be in the data, that is to say, the national data of the voters register of INEC, and which was duly captured. So what matters is that, what the court tried to do is to look at the content. What is the essence of having either the PVC or the temporary voters card? And what the BVAS has done is that even if you don't come with your card, provided upon putting your thumb printing or your facial distancing, you didn't recognize it, or you either recognize or you are not recognized. It's either it captures you or it doesn't capture you. If it captures you, you belong to that polling unit. If it doesn't capture you, you are out, as it were. So it's not a question of saying that if you don't have your PVC, you cannot vote. That is depriving you of your right to exercise your fundamental and constitutional right to vote or be voted for. That is, for me, what the court tries to do, because it looked at it vis-a-vis the constitutional provision of the law, to see whether what INEC has done by way of saying that if you don't come with your PVC, that you cannot vote. No, that shouldn't be the position. That's what the court has done in this case. The court's interpretation was for purposes of the 2023 election, even though the judgment came a bit late, because the first round of election had already gone. So what it means that they can use it in this subsequent election. All that matters is that, one, identify where your polling unit is. Where do you have your polling unit? Once you have your polling unit, they can arm themselves with that judgment. They can go to the polling unit and they will present it for identification purposes. And for identification for what the court, what the polling officer will only do is to take your biometrics, either your fingerprint or your facial expression. If it captures, all well and good, you pass the test to vote. If it doesn't capture you, you go. Because on the election day, there are people that even have their PVC. They couldn't vote. They couldn't vote. Why? Because it didn't capture their fingerprint, nor did it capture the facial expression. So it means that they are not registered in that area or in that polling unit, as it were.
I'd like to explore the point you made, and in order not to cause confusion, just to be clear on it, as to how this can be stretched. Because the plaintiffs in this case, Koporola, Olusegun, and Wilson Allwell, according to the judgment, are the ones that can enjoy, use that term, the judgment that came out of the court. And to speak further to that, the court took into consideration perhaps the peculiarity. I don't know if you can hear me, Mr. Meribe.
Hearing you, go ahead.
Okay. I think the court also took into consideration the peculiarity of their case, saying that, well, they went to try to get their PVCs at the INEC office, the defendants in this case. They went time and again, and eventually they were told that it had closed. By the way, they had always been told that it was not ready, and eventually they told them that it had closed. So they had to present that evidence that they went and tried to fulfill all the requirements to possess their PVCs. And I think that might not be the case for every other person with the TVC, that's a temporary voter card. So do you think it is fair for those who the courts did not mention specifically, I'm talking about other Nigerians with their TVCs, those who were not sure actually went through that process of possessing their PVCs to now want to, again, enjoy this judgment, just to be clear?
Now, let me tell you, that's why I said, because the action was not done in a representative capacity does not mean that it will not be binding. I repeat, that it wasn't done in a representative capacity does not mean that those who fall in the same category with those that instituted the action cannot take advantage of the judgment to or ignore in their favor. That doesn't mean so. It doesn't mean that, what you are simply saying is that, or what if we go by the the question that has been raised, it means that every single voter that have experienced the same or similar problem which the current litigant had before getting judgment, everybody should go to court. Just imagine how the court will look like. No, that is not so. That is why if you go to section 287 of the Constitution, This judgment is binding on all authorities, and INEC is one of them.
Just to be clear, Mr.
Binding
Meribeh,
on all authorities.
pardon me, because not everyone is a legal practitioner. Let's understand what this, excuse me, what this representative capacity means. Because again, the court was quite clear on the third order, saying that this suit having not brought in a representative capacity, I find myself unable to grant any relief pursuant to Prayer 3 of the plaintiff's application. Now, Prayer 3 specifically says that any order the court may deem fit for all other Nigerians who are like the plaintiffs and have not gotten their permanent voters card as the court may deem fit. So it was specific, saying I'm not going to grant that. So help us understand, what does this representative capacity mean?
Now you discover that when you are talking about representative capacity, what it means that at the time the action was filed, they are filing not only for themselves, but on behalf of the general public, that's Nigerians generally, all those that are suffering similar fate with him. That is what you mean to file on a representative capacity. And for you to do that, you must show and evince evidence that you have the right to do so, or better still, you have the consent of every other person to do so. Now, since that was not done, it will be absurd for the court in question to move forward further, because, mind you, that third prayer was a discretionary prayer. It was a prayer sought for, asking the court to just exercise discretion to either give or not to give. That's why I say, if it may deem in the circumstance to award. So, having not proved that you are coming in a representative capacity, the court is not at liberty to move and say, okay, I agree with you. This thing affects every other person. Not until you know that every other person has that same problem would you now proceed, because the court, as a general rule, acts based on facts that is presented before them. And to the extent of that judgment, it is the fact that those two people presented that gave rise to the judgment that the court gave. But that is not to say that those who have similar problems or issues, just like I said, all Nigerians cannot begin to move and say, go to court, that is individually, start asking the court to give them award. No. For all intents and purposes, what this court has done in respect of the provisions of the law is to interpret it and say, this is how this thing should be interpreted. As long as your fact falls within the realm of what these people suffer, you can equally enjoy same. But the court cannot move about and say, look, this suit was filed, haven't made this order, is also binding on every other Nigerian that has similar thing. No, because the action was that representative capacity, in that capacity.
But, you know, I find it's quite interesting because, the court says one thing, you agree to that, and then you say that Nigerians can take advantage of it, when indeed you also agree that it was not brought in representative capacity, and the court was quite clear. My concern is ensuring that we don't put, the INEC officials who will be conducting the election in a tricky situation, because the plaintiffs, again, in this case, they are Koforo Olusegun and Wilson Allwell, and the court was quite explicit. So if Nigerians would partake, Nigerians with TVCs will partake in the order, what needs to be done? Do they need to now go in a representative capacity or what? Just to be clear on that before Bukola comes in.
Let me tell you, because you can't capture all Nigerians as far as this issue is concerned. Number one, what I'm simply saying is that the people that are suffering this fate, they are very many. So every other person, what will mean if we now want to go by just mere looking at the judgment on the face of it, are we now going to institute individual action? That would be, it means that the court can't even contain them. That's number one. Number two, when the court had made that pronouncement, because like I said, that third prayer was an alternative prayer, and it was left to the discretion of the court to either give or not to give. That the court refused it does not mean that those who are suffering similar fate and have seen this ruling cannot take advantage of it. Like I said, what the court has done is to interpret the provisions of the Electoral Act concerning having voters' card for purposes of what? Voting. That is what the court has done. And so I would think that for INEC, on their part, all they need to do is to issue a statement saying that those that have what they call a temporary voters card, otherwise TVC, can equally go to their polling unit because each of these people were captured, as it were. If they were captured at the data, national registration data of INEC, and clearly they have a polling unit assigned to them, because the whole essence of the temporary voters card, which you have, is for identification as well. So if you have it, so to speak, you can proceed to the polling unit where you are registered. And you'll be allowed, okay, what does INEC suffer? By refusing these people who actually registered and are in that polling unit.
And that's
tomorrow
exactly...
Tomorrow they'll say that there is apathy in voting. Meanwhile, all of these people have a right to vote. They are supposed to be there to vote.
That's exactly...
So what would INEC suffer in refusing them if they are indeed registered in that polling unit?
Exactly, Mr. Meribe. That's exactly
yes,
my concern. The implications for INEC officials. I'm trying to see this from the point of view of INEC. You know, the work of a presiding officer is not an easy one. You know, be they one or two at a polling unit. Imagine a sea of voters just waiting to vote and the number of hours that they have to commit to ensuring that the process is over and done with. You know, the Electoral Act, Section 47, provides, though for a voter's card, it doesn't specify whether it's a PVC or it's a TVC, but it says a voter's card. I wonder if the BVAS machine can authenticate the details of a voter, of the PVC of the TVC as it would a PVC. So isn't it a call to disorderliness if you say that other Nigerians can take advantage of this?
No, it's not. It's not. Because even the TVC, once you are given what they call a TVC, there's a VIN number. Everybody is identified by a VIN number. And even on the election day, that was done. Even those that were identified with VIN number on the election day, some of them couldn't vote because their fingerprint and the facial expression couldn't match.
Then, Mr. Meribe, some Nigerians can also go to court and ask the court, to allow them to vote with their PIN number, with their VIN number.
No, excuse me. What you ask yourself, why do we have this bimodal accreditation system? Is to be sure that the person who is registered there is the person that is coming to vote. So you may have that VIN number, but you are not the one that is registered to vote in that polling unit. So let us get it clear so that we don't mix it up. So the whole essence is to be sure that the person coming before the presiding officer is the person registered to vote in that very location or polling unit. Anything outside it is, it's not acceptable. So the point of interest is that as long as you have, because like I said, in the election proper, the VIN number is also imputed in the bimodal. Then your fingerprint is taken to authenticate, are you the owner of this VIN number? If it says yes, you proceed. If he says no, they do the second one, which is the facial expression. If he says no, he says no, this is not the owner, please, my friend, take either your PVC or your temporary vote. Go, you cannot vote here. Simple.
So at the moment, INEC has said that, appears we lost it. INEC has said they're taking immediate steps. They're taking immediate steps to appeal this matter. So, Mr. Meribe, I don't know if you can hear me. They say, so does it mean then, since INEC is saying they're taking immediate steps to appeal this matter, if the information is not out there that they've successfully or that they've gone ahead to appeal, it means that these two persons, and who knows, any other person who suffers the same fate, can go present their temporary voter card and should be allowed to vote. Is that right?
Now, let me tell you, the appeal, like I said, before you proceed on appeal, the ultimate question, like I said, is that what do you stand to suffer? What do you stand to suffer if this is allowed? It's a simple question that you ask INEC. What would they suffer if this is what allowed. Because if you cannot show what you will suffer on appeal, then don't even waste time going there to using taxpayers' money to go on appeal. You must show that by allowing the TVC, that is the temporary voters card, for those that have it to vote, that you are going to suffer enormous damages, so to say, or irreparable damages, then we will not start talking. But as far as I'm concerned, I've looked at it. What do they stand to suffer? Because all it requires is that for those that have their TVC, just go there. If you are then, after all, those that have PVC, many of them, some of them that have their permanent voters card, they still did not vote because their biometrics did not match. So that's simply what we're talking about. Unless you are not going to use the beavers, as long as the beavers will be used, that is why they call it the game changer.
I guess we'll wait and see how this plays out in the courts, because when you say INEC, what will you suffer? Don't waste taxpayers' money. Basically, INEC, even though you have the money, your money is not your money. Your money is taxpayers' money. So they need to be cautious how they approach all of this. But we do appreciate your perspectives and time this morning, Mr. Matase Meribe. Thank you for your coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Victor Okpatola joins us next. He's a legal practitioner. Mr. Victor, thank you for joining us on the program today. Now, concerning this matter about temporary voter cards, tell us, why did you go to court, two of you, and what was your role in this matter? Did you not have a permanent voter card? Give us a background to this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. First, I'm the legal practitioner in the matter. I am not the plaintiff. And the reason why my clients approached me to, take the matter to court is because they felt that they have the right to vote. And with the fact that they have fulfilled all necessary requirements of the law. They have registered to vote. They've gone to their voters card collection centers numerous times, but they were not able to get their permanent voters card. So the rationale behind the suit is, one, to ensure that they vote, because according to the INEC chairman, you cannot vote without your permanent voters card. Meanwhile, they have their temporary voters card, which contains the same information in which they can use to vote as if it was the permanent voters card. So the rationale behind it, the reason why the plaintiffs approached the court, is because they felt they have a right, a legal right, and they have fulfilled all legal requirements for them to enjoy this right. And the negligence of INEC should not disenfranchise them from exercising their right to vote. So that's the rationale behind it.
All right, so INEC has said that they are taking immediate steps to appeal this matter. Are you going to be involved? What do you think of that?
Yes, I was the lawyer that handled the matter at Federal High Court. So if INEC believes the best way to go to ensure that millions of Nigerian citizens are disenfranchised is to appeal, definitely no problem. They can always appeal. It's a right.
All right, Mr. Patola, we know that you have to run, but we do appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's switch over now to Mr. Jonathan Asake. He is the governorship candidate of the Labour Party in Kaduna State. He joins us virtually. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. We have spoken to other contestants, candidates yesterday about their quest to clinch the #1 seat in Kaduna State, and then following through, as a matter of fact, from how the elections panned out February, the presidential and National Assembly elections. So we'll go through all of that. So tell us, at the moment, because in fact, yesterday, we also did take up this matter with the PDP candidate about the question of whether or not Labour and the PDP have this alliance. Is there any such conversation as to Labour Party stepping down for the PDP, because the news was awash with everything, even though your commentary is out there for everybody to see. But that narrative, that perspective just won't go away. So could you tell us, because now we understand that there are some PDP members in Southern Kaduna, your particular area, who want you to step down.
Thank you and good morning. It is true that the whole news went viral, that I, as the gubernatorial candidate of the Labour Party in Kaduna State, have stepped down for the PDP candidate, and that my party, the Labour Party, is in alliance with the PDP. I have come on air and debunk that. My party has done the same, and other organs of the party have done the same. I want to clarify it here, that there is no such time that either myself or my campaign organization or the Labour Party in Kaduna State or even nationally have had any discussion with any political party, not only the PDP, but any political party, including the PDP, that we are going on alliance.
Okay.
I believe that was just a orchestrated propaganda to discourage our supporters and dampen their spirit, ahead of the gubernatorial election. And I could see that generally the PDP, which prides itself of having their strong support base in the southern part of Kaduna State, has seen clearly that they have lost that support base with the emergence of the Labour Party and my candidature in that part of the state.
So let's stretch it a little further, Mr. Shake. When you say that they lost their base or they lost that support base, if you look at the results that came through, PDP won all the senatorial seats in Kaduna, and then they won 10 seats in the House of Reps. APC got 4, Labour Party has 2. So who's stronger? Doesn't that indicate that PDP may have, from these results, they had a way better showing than Labour?
But we check the general results. You check. I'm talking about Southern Kaduna here, and before this time, from 1999 all the way up to 2015, if you check the results, all the PDP governors that have emerged, starting from Governor Makarfi, who had 8 years, and Governor Namadi, who took after him and had only about 2 years thereabout before he was uplifted to become vice president, and Governor Yekua, who also won, and up to the time the APC took over. The PDP always harvested its winning votes from the southern part of the state. And so that part of the state has become the part that gives the PDP block votes to win. And from 2015 also up to today, it still produces the block votes. You may recall that in 2019, the presidential candidate of the PDP then, Vice President Atiku Abubakar, scored the highest votes, about 800,000 in Kaduna State, all over the nation. Kaduna got the highest votes for him, courtesy Southern Kaduna. So that is the part of the state that produces the block votes for the PDP. So with the emergence of the Labour Party, that equation began to change. So if you check the last presidential and National Assembly elections, you will see that that part still produced. We won in the Southern Central District clearly for the presidential election. 6 out of the 8 local governments, and in the Central, we won 2. And so you will see that the performance in the southern part of the state was still, the best, out of all the parties that participated in that election. So seeing that and seeing that the permutations for the presidential and National Assembly election is different from the one for the governorship.
Okay, so
the PPP, I believe, became jittery and became unsettled. and so resorted to this kind of a very cheap propaganda.
All right, so what do you say to those who think, first, they thought that your entrance into the race was late, they thought it was an afterthought on your part, and then what would it then profit Labour if you get the votes in the southern part and you don't get in the other two parts? And because at the end of the day, you will just probably harvest the votes from the south, PDP gets some, and then APC and their supporters will go ahead and just march straight into government house because PDP and Labour Party have split their votes.
That is a fallacy. That is a lie that is being sold out to the public. My emergence as a candidate was never just a sudden emergence, as it is being said. If you look at the whole scenario, the emergence of the Labour Party generally and the national landscape, became a child of necessity. Seeing the frustration Nigerians went through, when they were expecting a change after the 8 years of the tortuous APC rule, they found out that the whole primaries, both parties, the APC and the PDP, was characterized by the use of huge money, dollars to be precise. In fact, we did a rough calculation. Each delegate in the convention, the presidential convention, each delegate, went away with about 16 million naira, if you convert it from dollars, because it was dollars that were shared. So Nigerians felt, well, thank God that Mr. Peter Obi pulled out of that and didn't want to go into a context that will be characterized by the huge use of money to induce delegates. And then if he's thrown up through that process, then he will lack the moral right and moral capacity to fight corruption, which actually has become the cancer of the nation. And so he pulled out, and then he went into the Labour Party, the party that was formed by the Nigerian workers, the Nigerian masses. And it became like a divine blow and became equal to the mega parties. And Nigerians accepted it. And his messages were clear all over the nation. The messages of hope, x-raying the problems of the nation, talking to people in town hall meetings, going around the country, and everybody keying into it, both inside the country and outside the country, and profiling solutions, what he can do. That his messages were different from other candidates. And so some of us in the states keyed into it, and we were given similar messages across the state. So in my own campaigning, we, myself and my deputy, Right Honorable Bashir Zangong Aya, who comes from the northern part of the state, a former majority leader of the House of Assembly, former commissioner of works, a grassroots politician. So we set our machinery of campaign. We went around, we had town hall meetings, we engaged groups and individuals, and we campaigned across the 23 local governments of the state. We campaigned across the 255 wards, and we find out that basically people of Kaduna State are tired, they are ready to change the system, not the PDP, not the APC. They wanted a party and leaders that will bring hope to them. And so the expression, the mood all over the state is the same. And so the PDP is aware of it. And so it is not true that APC will have a free walk to government house. APC is not even in the equation. It is PDP versus a Labour Party. And the PDP, which believes that they can only beat the APC and the NNPP in the northern part by using the block votes from the southern part, now find out that Labour Party has taken over the southern part. So where else do they go? They have to go and compete with the APC and then the NNPP and the PRP, and now even the ADP in the northern part. And so that became the difficult thing for them. And so they resorted to this cheap blackmail and campaign of calumny and so on against the Labour Party. But I can assure you that supporters of the Labour Party and we in the Labour Party reviewed the last elections of the 25th of February, and we saw what the lapses were. very obvious lapses. We thought in our church mind that the whole thing about beavers and direct electronic transmission of results was actually true. But we found out that it was not really true. It was not really the case. There were serious irregularities in many parts. And the Labour Party, we had the lapses of not having our agents in every place because of certain challenges. So we have put some of those things in place and ready to face the next election. And so it is the story on the ground.
Well, we'll look to see how that would, materialize or how it would play out on the 18th. But I am just wondering, because you have just said now that indeed Labour Party is very strong in southern Kaduna, and I do know that you were former president of the Southern Kaduna People's Union, SOCAPO, which has been asking for certain things over a period of time. I'm just wondering, how do you intend to reach out to other, I think my colleague already asked that somehow, but how do you intend to reach out to other people who might think that Labour Party is a Southern Kaduna People's agenda?
Labour Party is never a Southern Kaduna People's agenda. That is what I just said. It is an expression of hope for people that felt they have been left out. I just said it here, that we have campaigned across the local governments. And indeed, the teeming masses in all the local governments feel that they have been left out. If you look at the policies of the APC in the state, in the last 7 years, getting to 8 years now, you will see that teachers and civil servants were just sacked, in their thousands, 21,000 teachers, and most of them were not paid their entitlements. And many of them have died, and many of their families have continued to suffer, pulling their widows, pulling their children out of school. And school fees were increased by in tertiary institutions by over 300%. And most of those students in schools, their parents cannot cope, and they are now staying out of school. And you can only tell what that has to do with the insecurity. They become a recruiting ground for criminals, bandits, and kidnappers, and what have you. And of course, businesses have been demolished. Business premises have been demolished without providing alternatives. And because of that, small businesses have relocated out of the state to other neighboring states or to outside the country. Investors have permanently stayed out of the state, and you will see even the level of insecurity. Kaduna State has become the epicenter of insecurity, kidnappings. You can recall billions of naira that have been extorted from poor parents, and so on and so forth. So people generally are in a state of dissatisfaction.
If I could follow up on that, pardon me, Mr. Asake, because of time. It was an issue that featured prominently in our conversation with the other candidates yesterday, this issue of security, which you're talking about. And I'd like to know what your approach will be, or what you plan to do if you're elected governor. Speaking to the APC's candidate, the PDP's candidate, they kind of differed on the approach to banditry particularly, which is not just affecting Kaduna State. We've seen it affect, other adjoining states, even the FCT and all of that. You were referring to just some of those cases now. So what will the approach be? We know that the current governor says, well, those areas, those forests should be bombarded. Yes, collateral damage will happen, but he believes that it's better to just bombard those areas. The PDP candidates believes that, well, these bandits are humans. How about you have like some sort of maybe a sit down and all of that? What will be your approach, Mr. Asake?
The first approach, I've always said it. publicly that any leader at any level must have the will, the political will, to address a situation. And if we come in, that political will is there already. Because having served as a SOCAPU president, I know the problem of insecurity, you know, the way insecurity has wrecked the entire state and has stopped virtually everything from moving forward. And so the first thing, if you remember when the Bethel Academy students were kidnapped, sometimes in April last year, the first thing that those kidnappers demanded was to demand for food items, bags of rice, vegetable oil, and other essential commodities. Those things were ferried to them in the forest. And with the present technology that we have of tracking devices, simple tracking devices that we put in our cars, it is not that these are not known, their locations are not known. These things were supplied to them in the forest. Who carried these things? And oftentimes they collect money in hundreds of millions. For instance, the 28th of March train passengers kidnapped. Only 8 of those family members coughed out over 900 million naira. Where did that money go to? Our intelligence agencies and financial crime agencies, you know, can track that money. That money finds its way into the banks. And when it finds its way into the banks, it is either some of those banks know where the money is coming from, the sources, or the sponsors. And so the government must have a will. So truly the start is to network.
All right.
Is to collaborate with
have
intelligence agencies,
right.
to track down such where funds are going to.
Okay, pardon me. So you can land on that point. We're less than a minute away, or in fact 30 seconds away from break. But you can land on that point. And I want you to be specific. Would you be negotiating, or would you be approaching maybe the way the current governor says, let's approach them, just bombard those areas? What would be your own approach as we wind down?
Well, negotiation will come in. It depends on the most expedient thing that we find on the table. If it is to negotiate, but first of all is to implement the way of fighting these terrorists and these criminals, and ensure that they are exposed, particularly their sponsors. They are publicly exposed and brought to book. And once that is done, is to cut off their source. And then, so it's not about negotiation. It's about getting the root.
But at the tail end, we've had some very incisive contributions from him. We'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Jonathan Seke, the governorship candidate of the Labour Party in Kaduna State. Thank you so much for your time. I literally got most of your responses through. Thank you once again.
All right, welcome back. Yes, Samson Itodo joins us next, Executive Director for IAGA. Thank you for coming on. Good morning.
Always a delight to be here. Morning.
If wishes were horses, I'm sure many will ride for tomorrow. But that's not going to happen. It's been postponed. And so there are several people who are not happy with how things have turned out. But the thing is, it appears as though there's still some hurdles to cross. That is what we're going to talk about today. All of this electoral dispute, the timeline, what to expect. So go ahead and give us that picture. What are the key things that we need to highlight at this point?
Thanks for having me. I think first it's important for Nigerians to know that the election process is not concluded. Even though results have been declared, winners have also been returned. That there is an opportunity for candidates as well as political parties to seek a redress in court, especially if they want to question the outcome of an election. And that is what is called election petition. So election petition is a process where stakeholders like candidates, like political parties, who are dissatisfied with the result of an election, submit a petition in the court and ask the court to review, a particular election, either to nullify the election or to declare them winners. So that's what election petition is.
Why do you think it's important for Nigerians to know this? I mean, because we've seen this before. We've seen situations whereby candidates who were originally declared later on had their results upturned. I mean, we've had that in our history. So why do you think it is important? I mean, that's something a lot of people already take for granted in terms of their knowledge. Why do you think it's important for them to pay particular attention to it?
It is important because unlike elections conducted by INEC that are regulated by the Electoral Act and INEC guidelines, now the contest is moved to the court. The court has its own rules, it has its own framework, it has its own time frame, which we will talk about. So it's important for Nigerians and members of the public to understand the process so they can follow and better engage. So there are no sort of misinformation out there in the public, but to also help them moderate their expectations, because often we misinterpret court judgments, and that could be a recipe for political instability or violence. So it's important that they understand this process, which is why, we're focused on explaining this process so they know, so they can follow the process. Now, there are tribunals and courts. So election petitions are a special kind of proceedings. They are not similar to your ordinary day election litigation, where you can approach any court, for remedies. Election petitions are special and they are in a class of their own. And it's not every court that can entertain an election petition. So the Constitution establishes separate tribunals for different elections. So the first tribunal, so for disputes on state houses of assembly elections holding next week, as well as the National Assembly elections that held on February 25th, there's a National Assembly and State House of Assembly election tribunal. And these tribunals are established in all the 36 states and the FCT. So that's the first tribunal, and that's the matter they are supposed to handle. The second one is the Governorship Election Tribunal. This Governorship Election Tribunal deals with matters that relate to governorship elections. And then for the presidential elections, where you have petitions against presidential elections, the Court of Appeal has the authority and what lawyers call the jurisdiction to entertain petitions on presidential elections. But you have another tribunal which has to do with the Area Council Election Tribunal, which deals with elections into local government area councils in the FCT based on provisions of the Electoral Act. So these are the courts. So the first step is you've got to identify the tribunal with the authority to deal with any petition on these elections. Now, if we move to the next slide, if you're going to question any election in Nigeria, it has to be based on a valid ground. Okay. And this ground needs to be recognized in the law. And this is where, Nigerians also need to pay close attention. That it's not everything that happens on election day that forms or constitutes a ground for questioning an election. There are three major grounds in the 2022 Electoral Act. The first ground is non-qualification. You've got to establish that the person who is declared a winner in an election does not qualify, and does not meet the constitutional requirements for contesting for that office. And there are four major criteria or qualifications. The first one deals with citizenship. You have to be a citizen of Nigeria. Then there are also age restrictions for the president. You must be 35 at the time of the election. For governors and senators, you have to be 35. And then for House of Reps and State Houses of Assemblies, you have to be 25 at the time of the election. The second ground is the ground for non-compliance and corrupt practices. This is often where all matters relating to falsification of results, things like errors in the management of the results collation process, things like bribery, impersonation, all that fall within this particular ground.
For those who are pouring through the BVAS, I beg your pardon, through the IREF now, those are the kind of things they should have in the back of their minds.
Especially if there is non-compliance. But the law also says it has to be substantial in such a way that it would affect the overall outcome. The third ground...
Just before you go to the third ground, I'm wondering where does destruction of ballot boxes, violence at polling booths, where do they fall?
So all that falls within ground 2, where you have corrupt practices. But you also need to demonstrate and show that it confers undue advantage to the person who was declared a winner. The third ground deals with the failure of the person who is declared a winner to score majority of lawful votes. And what this ground actually presupposes is that, one, the issues around if there are alterations or miscalculation of the votes, this is the ground. Secondly, if you're going to establish that the person declared a winner does not fulfill the legal requirements, and you know for some of the elections, the legal requirements are very clear. For presidential or governorship, you need to score highest number of votes, as well as the spread, 25% in 2/3 of the state and the FCT for presidential, and then for the state houses of assembly, it's 2/3, 25% in 2/3 of all the local governments of the state. So these are the grounds. Okay. Any other ground will not lead to any successful petition in the court.
How much time do people have? Is that the next one? Timeline?
No, I was going to ask, I was just going to highlight the fact that that's why the conversation on FCT, whether the FCT, winning the FCT is a compulsory requirement or not, will make sense. Because people, there was some controversy about, I think it's because
of that will come under the third ground. And once you don't have a valid ground, even the court cannot entertain your petition. Oh dear. And that's important. I think the next slide takes us to the
How much time do they have to prove this case?
That's a very interesting one. And if we go to the next slide, the first thing to note is to file the petition, there's a time frame. The thing about election petition is time is of essence. And if you do not file, if you go out of time, then you can't successfully, resolve that particular dispute because time is of essence. So first, to submit a petition, it must be within 21 days from the date of the declaration of the results. For the presidential elections, the result was declared, I think, on the 28th the 28th. And if you calculate that, so it's not been 21 days yet, but you have 21 days to file. Now, once you file this in any of the tribunals, the tribunal has 180 days, to resolve that particular dispute. And it's 180 days from the day that you filed that particular petition. So 180 days, that's 6 months. So at the tribunal level, they have 6 months. If you appeal, now to appeal, so let's assume a tribunal has delivered its judgment and you are dissatisfied with the judgment. You've got 21 days, to file your notice of appeal at the tribunal. But then when the matter goes to the appeal court, and we will talk about, levels of appeal, the appellate court, and in this case, either the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court has 60 days, to deliver its judgment on the appeal submitted by or filed by any candidate.
That's roughly 2 months.
That's roughly 2 months. And lastly, if you're going to appeal the decision of an appellate court, so if you're going to appeal the decision of a Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court, there are practice directions provided by the court that you must file that within 14 days from the date the decision appealed against was delivered. So I think if we go to the next slide, you would see what are the appeal levels and then the amount of time that it will take. And this is where Nigerians also need to pay close attention. So for instance, if you're looking at appeals, so appeals for National Assembly and State Houses of Assemblies, those appeals will go to the Court of Appeal. And that is the final court for determining matters related to National Assembly elections and the State Assembly elections. So that's the matter terminates at the Court of Appeal. For governorship elections, Once you're dissatisfied, you can appeal to the Court of Appeal, and then from the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is the final arbiter when it comes to governorship elections. And then for presidential petitions, you move from the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. So these are the levels or stages of appeal. The last slide talks about the amount of time, and this is where it gets very interesting, and we need to know. So if you look at on matters or disputes on National Assembly and State House of Assembly elections, it takes approximately 8 months to resolve. Remember, 6 months for the tribunal and 2 months for the appeal. So that's 8 months. So it takes 8 months, and it's 8 months from the day that the petition is filed. For governorship election disputes, it takes an approximate 10 months to resolve. And this is the 6 months at the tribunal, the 2 months at the Court of Appeal, and then the 2 months at the Supreme Court, so 10 months. And then for presidential election disputes, it will take an approximate 8 months, because at the tribunal stage is 6 months, and then Supreme Court is about 2 months. So if you look from now till the end of the year, we're probably going to be focused on the courts to resolve this dispute. So these are the timelines, you know, for the resolution of election disputes, as provided in the 1999 Constitution as amended and the 2022 Electoral Act.
My colleagues in Lagos have got some questions for you.
Thank you, Chamberlain. We're pretty out of time, but a very quick one, Mr. Itodo. Looking at the estimated time frames for resolving disputes, for the presidential election dispute is 8 months, and governorship 10, National Assembly 8. So should there be a review to the extent that the process will be deemed not to have been concluded until the disputes have been resolved? You know what they say about justice not having been served until the aggrieved person has been assuaged. So, but what we have now is that the system pretty much goes on, and then the petitions, you know, continue in court. So should there be that review such that the process has not been concluded until the aggrieved person has been assuaged?
Well, so in terms of review, the question is who is reviewing? For the presidential elections, as you know, Section 64 of the Electoral Act gives INEC 7 days, you know, to review. If INEC has not reviewed the elections and return, you know, has been made, certificate of return have been issued, the matters are now within the jurisdiction of the court. So it will be the court now that will take or rule, I would say, will have the final say in relation to the outcome of those elections, especially for election petitions related to the elections that are held on February 25th. But we have an election next weekend, and that's 18th. So perhaps in the course of the collation process, or even after a declaration has been made, INEC will have 7 days to review any outcome of those elections. But once it is out of the time prescribed by the law, then no action can be taken, because time is of essence due to the sui generis nature of election petitions. But for pre-election matters, those matters are still being handled by the courts.
You know, there's this question screaming in my head, and I don't know, I just succumbed to the temptation. And that's the outcome of the court yesterday regarding whether or not to use a TVC, that's a temporary voter card, particularly for those two plaintiffs, Koforola, Olusegun, and Wilson Allwell. And it's raised that question again, ensuring that people are not disenfranchised. After all, the Nigerian citizens, they have registered to vote and they want to exercise their franchise. Well, INEC says it will appeal that particular judgment. But I wonder, for you, in the whole scheme of things, yes, this is not about petitions. This is about maybe voter petition in this case. In the whole scheme of things, perhaps would you say this is a right way forward, saying that the BVAS doesn't actually read the PVC itself, the plastic, as the card reader? So I wonder what your take will be on this. Now, I'm putting you on the spot, but I had to yield to that temptation.
Well, I don't feel I'm on the spot. For Yiga Africa, we believe that voters can cast their vote without the PVC. This is something that we should consider after the 2023 elections. For subsequent elections, people don't need their PVCs anymore because their details are already contained on the beavers. The only concern that we have from an election administration point of view, it is dangerous to change your guidelines and change your procedure when you are in an election. And we're in an election, and changing the guidelines in relation to this particular matter would cause a lot of confusion, and it will open up the entire process for capture and manipulation. So INEC is going to appeal, so we wait to see what the court will rule. But if you follow the trends, the court have always upheld and defended INEC's independence to determine, the procedure for elections. But quite frankly, in subsequent elections, people don't need their PVCs to vote. They can vote with any form of identification as long as, their names are on the voters register. And we hope that post-elections, we will have an audit and a review that inspires confidence on the minds of Nigerians. Because all these worries that INEC and other stakeholders have is whether this process will be open to capture. So that's our position on this particular matter. But I'm glad that these individuals and Nigerians went to the court. It shows that there is belief and confidence that justice can still be obtained from our courts.
All right, thank you, Samson. Just before you go, the National Association of Women Judges in Nigeria, they've got a message from their president, Honorable Justice Juma Isangishi, is saluting all of them on this is an auspicious day of women judges, International Day of Women Judges. I mean, speaking about the courts here. So she reminds everyone that it was the UN in 2021, the UN General Assembly adopting Resolution 75274, which designated 10th March, that's today, the International Day of Women Judges. Now, that resolution, she goes on to say, invites member states and all relevant stakeholders to observe the International Day of Women Judges annually, including through education, public awareness. They want us to, and everybody else, to help in promoting full and equal participation of women at all levels of the judiciary. The resolution reaffirms that the active participation of women on equal terms with men at all levels of decision-making is essential to the achievement of equality, sustainable development, peace, and democracy. Incidentally, I think I remember we have had a female CJ, and so I don't think we're doing badly on that one. But then she calls on all stakeholders, including NGOs, to assist in publicizing these issues and offering their own contribution towards their resolution. So
you didn't highlight the issues. The issues include
the
increased prevalence of domestic violence, provisions of shelter for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And I think she also highlighted, establishment of halfway houses for youths in conflict with the law to give opportunity for effective and long-lasting rehabilitation, the continued practice of genital mutilation, and repugnant customary laws and challenge of widows. So quite a number of issues that she wants CSOs to focus on.
So happy celebrations on this day. And Samson, thank you for coming on, and all the best. So that is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week. Yeah, I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
Happy International Women's Month. I'm Malpo Yusuf. Goodbye.
Oh, it's a whole month.
Yes, the whole month.
Chamberlain is getting tired of it already. But don't worry, it'll be time for the Men's Day celebrations very soon. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
We're not tired. You can have the whole year. In fact, have the world. Have a fantastic weekend. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Goodbye.